hearing today. I want to thank our witnesses for your valuable testimony here today and the conversation. I welcome the opportunity to visit about renewing GSP, as has been mentioned, one of our oldest and largest trade agreements. To put things into context, since the last GSP lapsed in December of 2020, U.S. companies have paid more than $2.6 billion in new tariffs. These tariffs pose a sizable barrier for small and medium-sized businesses that are looking, obviously, to diversify their supply chains and move production away from China. At the same time, the current market access provisions in GSP do not reflect the realities of the 21st century economy, as has been alluded to by many of you. I believe we should take a hard look at updating GSP criteria to include provisions to protect U.S. businesses from unfair trading practices like data restrictions, localization, and other digital trading barriers. Mr. Corey, I appreciated your comments expressing frustration with the current administration's lack of a trade policy, particularly in the Indo-Pacific region and with IPEF. I'd like to first discuss with you unfair digital trading barriers and how GSP can potentially rebalance the scales. As you mentioned in your written testimony, despite countries such as Indonesia and Brazil and Pakistan ramping up data controls and digital trade barriers like mandatory data localization and forced local data storage, these countries would enjoy tariff-free access to U.S. markets under the previous GSP criteria. Because of these digital controls, many small and medium-sized manufacturers are priced out of the same markets as their local competitors. With that, what are the consequences to these small and medium-sized enterprises based in the U.S. if such trade imbalances continue unchecked?
Thank you for the question, Representative LaHood. Appreciate your strong advocacy on a strong U.S. digital trade agenda. The short answer is that SMEs, digital technologies and the internet have changed the nature of trade in essentially removing the impact that geography has. And so it provides enormous opportunity for individuals and SMEs to access customers and markets to not only survive but grow. But they tend to rely, obviously they're very cost conscious, and they tend to rely on centralised IT services for them to operate around the world. And so when they run into these digital barriers in Pakistan, Indonesia and elsewhere, they can't enter. They can't sort of take advantage of these technologies, even though they sort of physically can now with them. And so it essentially pushes them out. And so this great benefit we see from digital technologies and trade is essentially removed. And in the absence of the US having either a trade agreement with these countries or with an updated GSP, the US officials are hamstrung in how effectively they can push back. And over time, this job of rolling these barriers back only gets harder. And so the sooner we have new trade agreements and updated GSP criteria to address digital barriers, the sooner SMEs and startups and individual traders can have certainty that they have guaranteed market access to these new, growing, emerging digital economies.
Thank you for that. And just as a follow-up to that, if we do not put forward stronger digital trade provisions, talk about the competitive advantage we continue to cede to China in this space.
Yeah, most definitely happening. Indonesia is a great example whereby Chinese cloud firms have gone into Indonesia and explicitly told the Indonesian officials that we are completely fine with data localization and other restrictions because it's what they're used to operating in China. And they're doing that explicitly to disadvantage US tech firms because they recognize that US firms obviously operate differently. And so there is this global competition in and around these regulations. And if the US firms can't rely on the US government to help them push back on these types of restrictions, US firms are going to lose out. And that will continue to happen in more and more countries as they also consider China-like data localization restrictions.
Thank you, sir. I yield back.